Hard to say which is the most important theme for Tolkien in Lord of the Rings, but um, evil probably is one of the main ones, but another one that is just as, if not more strong, is courage. Courage is shown all throughout Lord of the Rings, and as if to highlight it. Every race shows courage, but the main character is very small, and the evil is spectacularly large. Um, and the whole time, it is weighing heavy on this tiny, tiny character, and none of the other bigger characters can sort of handle his burden and his fears. So definitely, courage is a major theme in the book. This theme was relevant, of course, to World War II because that was another evil that was spectacularly large, and September 11th. Um, that was an evil that was not only large, it was large and suddenly imminent, and just very, very um, quick, and it sort of knocked everybody. Um, it caught everyone by surprise because and nobody was expecting it, and just like nobody was expecting Sauron, the hobbits lived in the Shire for a long time, not even knowing, and so we're kind of surprised by this Dark Lord. And while World War II maybe didn't have the amount of surprise because they had World War I to draw from, they still had this idea of being very small compared to someone very large. England is a very small island land-wise compared to the rest of Europe, and yet uh, they constantly, since then you always hear the comparisons of a small island versus this huge unspeakable evil. So uh, that draws ideas to again this small hobbit um, facing this unspeakable evil. And there needs to be fear for there to be uh, courage. You cannot be brave unless there's something to fear. And so there has to be this huge evil. Um, Courage is shown against the inevitable. Um, in class, we sort of covered this idea of um, the long defeat. The whole world is fading, and the whole world is changing. And so, at both times in history, it's a transition sort of period. Um, in World War II, we saw industrialization happen. And so war happened on such a much larger scale than it had been before. And you see ties in Lord of the Rings where with this sort of industrial idea of warfare as well. Um, you see the nature fading away and more machinery and gears and black smoke. These are all things that are mentioned. The transition period for the United States was the turn of the millennium, which we saw technology rising, and so that was taking into the way we used warfare as well. Um, Courage and hopelessness. Um, the thing I can think of most um, for World War II is people who were obviously feet on the ground outside of their borders where they were comfortable, but also in hopelessness at home where England was just getting bombed and bombed again and again, and not being able to even think what tomorrow is going to bring, just wondering about today. Hopelessness in September 11th presents itself in almost an elemental terror. These enormous skyscrapers falling down and firefighters diving um, into collapsing huge buildings. It you know, I look at that and I can't help but notice that this huge fear, this idea of hopelessness, and yet finding the courage some way to go on in both those situations is immense. I also can't help but think about the posters in World War II: "Keep calm and carry on," even in a hopeless situation. Um, and in both cases, also, we have this idea of courage to protect home. Frodo is going to protect the Shire, World War II happened to protect Britain, and courage was definitely demonstrated September 11th. This was an attack on our home. And so both generations knew this idea of they couldn't relate to Frodo. Why would you be this courageous? Well, it's because there's something to protect there. And perhaps that's Tolkien felt that. Uh, it's hard to imagine Tolkien um, not appreciating home. He himself said, that he's sort of a hobbit himself because he likes tea and he likes food and he likes comfort and pipes. And so there's that idea of home that there is to protect. And both generations are related to it.